So we have looked at the UN's definition of good governance. We have looked at the Council of Europe's definition of good governance or attribute of good governance, which they think are important. Now we look at how governance and good governance have evolved in World Bank's literature. So what World Bank thought of good governance and governance in the early 90s, and what it thinks about good governance and governance now. So it's not a static thing. So as we have moved from early 90s to now 2019, the good governance concept has changed. It has expanded. It has taken in many new things which were not there initially. So now it's a much expanded, a much more detailed concept than it was earlier. So this module will look at the changes that have happened in good governance over the years, over the last 2-3 decades. So the good governance or the governance was not something which was given importance by the World Bank in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. In the late 80s, there was lots of changes. So there was the political upheaval in the Eastern Europe, the whole communist system collapsed. Then in the African countries, there was this big economic recession. And then World Bank and IMF was invited, and they came up with structural adjustment programs, which was a major change for African countries, and it tried to shift the public sector services to the private sector. So these were the two major changes which happened in the late 80s, and it was in this scenario that the concept of governance and good governance evolved for the first time and became the indispensable concept which it is now. So in the 1989 World Bank's study Sub-Saharan Africa from crisis to sustainable growth, it was the first time that governance was mentioned or given importance. So it was described to, it was used to describe a better public sector. And the actual definition was the exercise of political power to manage a nation's affairs. Then, of course, if you in 1992, there was the World Bank's annual development report. So it was focused on governance. So the topic was governance and development, how governance and development are linked, and how without good governance and without governance there is no development. So the definition in that book or report was the manner in which power is exercised in the management of a country's economic and social resources for development. 2 years down the road, then there was this another report by the World Bank, and it then defined governance in a much more detailed way and in a much more in a way similar to as we have seen in the two previous modules how UN or Council of Europe has defined. So according to the new or 1994 definition, the governance was defined as, or the good governance was defined as predictable, open, enlightened policymaking, which requires a bureaucracy imbued with professional ethos, an executive arm of government accountable for its actions. So accountability, openness, transparency, which we have seen before, are again present here. A strong civil society participating in public affairs. So participation is also there. All behaving under the rule of law. So the rule of law is also there. So these are the things which World Bank looked at in 1994. So how these good governance or governance definition has expanded in the last 3 decades. So initially the public sector management was a very small affair, which meant that less corruption and more better policies. But over the years, World Bank has expanded its definition of how public sector reform is done. So it's not only looking at the general public sector reform. So it is looking at how local governments can be reformed. It's looking out how taxation systems can be reformed. It's looking at how, for example, police can be reformed. It is looking at how different social sector areas like policies related to housing can be made better. So initially it was very general. Now it's more and more specific. Public sector reform. Then there are two types of accountability that have been distinguished. So there is the internal accountability and the external accountability. So in the internal accountability, there is, accountability within the organization. External accountability is accountability outside the organization. Then there are different also vertical and horizontal accountability. And World Bank also looked at exit and voice, meaning thereby that public should have options. If it doesn't like the public service provided, it should have the option to move to something else without paying much more money. So that was also included. It also went for better judicial systems and judicial reform, more transparency and information. So World Bank has helped country to come with the Right of Information Acts so that there is more transparency. So all these things have helped the World Bank to come up over the years. World Bank is adding more and more to expand this concept and take different things together. And it includes, for example, economic efficiency, prevention of corruption, and policies of different policies. So this is how the World Bank has the concept of governance of World Bank has evolved over the last 3 decades.